You can do or be anything you want. Not because of your powers, but because of who you are.
Sonic 3 recently premiered in theaters and introduced the audience to a new major player in the franchise. Shadow the Hedgehog is a stern and more pragmatic version of the film's primary protagonist. Unlike Sonic, who is taken in by Tom and Maddie, Shadow's origin story is much darker, and it sends him down a dark path. 50 years before Sonic appears in Green Hills, Shadow falls to Earth within a meteor. He is extracted from the creator and experimented on by a team of scientists, led by Gerald Robotnik. Robotnik's young granddaughter Maria lived in the facility and quickly became Shadow's best friend. In fact, she's likely the sole reason his time as a test subject felt bearable. Unfortunately, Shadow's time with the scientist is short-lived, as Robotnik's research is shut down by G.U.N. Maria loses her life in G.U.N's initial raid, and the loss of his best friend sends Shadow on a quest for vengeance. Maria is the catalyst for everything that happens to Shadow, so I can't help imagining what Shadow's life would have been like had Maria's life been spared. In today's video, I'll discuss what an alternative life could have looked like. A main component of Shadow's story is that he undergoes cryostasis after G.U.N apprehends him. Although Shadow was learning to embrace his life with the Robotniks, and during their experiments in exchange for free roaming around the base, he was still viewed as a highly dangerous individual by the government. While Maria is killed in the raid and Robotnik imprisoned, G.U.N decides to suspend Shadow between life and death. He remains stuck within cryostasis for 50 years, where he dreams about Maria and continuously relives her death. The entire experience was traumatic and likely fueled Shadow's hate for the modern world. When Robotnik frees him from cryostasis, Shadow awakes with 5 decades worth of pent-up grief and rage on behalf of his closest friend. I can't blame him for going on a rampage and wanting revenge on G.U.N, even though he takes his vendetta to the extreme. It's worth mentioning that Shadow is only caught by G.U.N because of Maria's premature death. She is caught in an explosion that takes her life. Robotnik and Shadow could have used the chaos to flee from the scene, but they stay with Maria instead, which leads to their capture. If Maria survived the explosion, even with a life-altering injury, it's possible Robotnik could have carried her from the scene, leading to their escape. Robotnik and Shadow could have taken turns nursing Maria back to health, while also hiding from G.U.N. If Gerald Robotnik is half as resourceful as his grandson, and he is, then he could have eventually continued his research on chaos energy later on. Meanwhile, Shadow and Maria could continue growing up together, allowing Shadow to know Maria well into her 60s. By avoiding cryostasis, Shadow would have 50 years to grow, adapt, and learn about Earth. Instead of experiencing the world through movies, music, and stories told by Maria, Shadow would have the opportunity to meet new people, forge friendships, and become a member of the Robotnik family. Although G.U.N would likely spend years trying to apprehend Shadow, his ability to teleport would make him nearly impossible to catch. Once outside of Gerald's facility, he would have the ability to go anywhere and do anything. He was already learning to become more open and empathetic during his short time with Maria, so an entire lifetime with her could only be a positive influence.
Let me go in, get the key, and destroy anyone in my way. I want revenge.
I like the idea of Shadow's character changing due to the people he surrounds himself with. For example, in Sonic 3, Gerald feeds into Shadow's desire for revenge and encourages him to help reclaim the Eclipse Cannon. Whenever Shadow doubts their actions or questions the validity of their plan, Gerald reminds him of Maria, reigniting his desire to avenge their lost loved one. In contrast, Shadow doesn't realize how extreme and inappropriate Gerald's plan is until he encounters Sonic and has a heart-to-heart with him about their shared experiences. Sonic also lost someone close to him at a young age, but instead of letting it change him, he allowed his new experiences and people to keep him on the right path. Shadow didn't have the luxury of a Tom or Maddie coming to save him, so it makes sense that his life is drastically different from Sonic's. That's why when Sonic reminds Shadow of the conversation he once had with Maria about a star's light remaining even after the star is gone, he immediately redeems himself by stopping the Eclipse Cannon. It's safe to assume that if Maria survived, Shadow would have grown up to be someone with more kindness and sympathy to spare. Granted, being hunted by G.U.N could still make him a little rough around the edges. There's plenty of potential for Shadow's story to deviate from this point on. By growing up with Maria, he could experience life by her side. He would be able to support her throughout childhood, and if she's raised by Gerald, I assume that she would be an equally successful scientist and inventor. With Maria and Gerald working together, the Robotniks could have helped Shadow test the limits of his abilities and harness chaos energy. Gerald had already learned how to use chaos energy as a power source as he created the Eclipse Cannon for G.U.N. Yet, in a perfect world, I doubt that Maria and Shadow would condone the creation of a lethal weapon for military use. Instead, they could develop chaos energy for other means, like providing Earth with a renewable energy source. Chaos energy could then push the world into a new era of technological advancement, leading to many discoveries in fields like science and technology. I can't help feeling like G.U.N making a deal with Robotnik in the original film is a cause for concern. If they felt like he was in the wrong for researching Shadow to begin with and believed him to be dangerous enough to imprison him for 50 years, their willingness to use him for the Eclipse canon points to significant corruption within their ranks. G.U.N have provided few reasons to trust them, but if the world began to place the Robotniks on a pedestal for their technological advancements, G.U.N would have no choice but to support them too.
Wait a second. If Shadow's been on ice for 50 years, someone had to help him escape.
Instead of hunting Shadow and his allies, they could offer Shadow a new deal. Given how much Shadow cares for a found family, there's no doubting his willingness to make their lives easier. If G.U.N offered to provide the Robotniks with safe and comfortable lives, Shadow would likely do anything they asked. He would become an obedient member of their organization. He's already effective and hard to beat when a lone operative, so official training would make him a force to be reckoned with. In this scenario, Shadow would undoubtedly make a name for himself during his 50 years on Earth. By the time Sonic arrives in the outskirts of Green Hills, Shadow could be a well-known public figure, accredited to harnessing chaos energy and enhancing their society. He would be an adult at this time, someone with more experience harnessing his unique abilities, which could make him the perfect mentor for Sonic. If Shadow earned the trust of G.U.N throughout his life, as G.U.N's director also learns to trust Sonic in the later films, then he and Sonic could have crossed paths during the events of the first film, allowing Shadow to take Sonic under his wing. Instead of meeting Tom and Maddie, who generously take Sonic in and help him find a new home on Earth, Sonic could have become an agent for the government. Given his unique abilities, his strength and speed would make him the perfect operative for undercover missions. G.U.N and similar organizations aren't opposed to using otherworldly creatures for personal gain. The government chooses to experiment on Shadow despite him being considered a child at the time, to study his chaos energy. Their experiments are only stopped because G.U.N catches wind of Gerald Robotnik's passion project and believes Shadow shouldn't be left unchecked. If Shadow had the opportunity to earn their trust, they would have been more likely to confiscate him, using him as a living weapon to complete sensitive missions. In the video games, G.U.N also associates them with another animal, Rouge the Bat. As a spy, mercenary, and treasure hunter, Rouge's skills make her a government asset. Shadow could have easily fulfilled the same role, as he's incredibly strong, clever, and can teleport from place to place without being caught. As a G.U.N operative, the government would likely view Sonic, even as a young hedgehog, as another worthy investment. If Sonic were placed under Shadow's care for training, he may have become the best operative in G.U.N's history and a much more pragmatic hero. Regardless of how the story played out, Shadow's life wouldn't have been perfect. People often fear what they don't understand, and Shadow reaped the consequences of humanity's ignorance. However, had the Robotniks remained at his side, Shadow would have stood a chance at making a life for himself on Earth, with or without G.U.N support. My favorite part of this alternate narrative is Shadow growing up to become a wizened and trustworthy mentor for Sonic, who could have benefited from having someone to watch over him during his earliest years on Earth. It's possible that, through enduring many hardships, Shadow could have made the world safer for others like him.
What are you doing? You won. Take your revenge.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on our uploads.
They tried to stop you, didn't they? But you came anyway. Your anger was too much.